Did you get your check from NASCAR this week?
I've been accused of being a NASCAR operative.
You're a plant. You're an industry plant. Let's just go and try and make something of this pod. No, show. It's a show. Many people have walked up to me lately this week, by the way, and were like, hey, how's the show? And I was like, it's going great. Thank you for listening. So on today's show, more legal stuff. We're going to try and not be lawyers. Don't let us be lawyers, please. We're going to dissect the latest ramifications from all things Talladega. We also are going to look ahead to the changes at this week's upcoming Roval race. We're going to talk about actual racing. Trust us. That is the key here. And IndyCar has a flashy new event, plus much, much more. But we start, Landon, as always, with the PR lap. I raced at Talladega, by the way.
Talladega was a race.
It was a race. I was in it. We hit everything. Literally everything. And I say we, really just me. I just found myself running into all sorts of stuff. Not our typical Super Speedway race. We did qualify really well, but we just couldn't seem to make any headway at the beginning of the race. We're on the bottom.
You finished 12th, right?
Yeah, we finished 12th, but we just got no stage points, which was just
Is
a
that
huge
your
bummer.
worst Super Speedway finish?
Not finish, no, because I got wrecked on the final at Talladega and at Daytona. I got wrecked at Daytona and on the final or second to last restart at the Spring Talladega from the lead. So we stuttered on fuel and got wrecked.
Where are we at on playoff stuff?
We're 16 down after Sam Mayer was disqualified for his heights being too low, which we'll dive into a little bit in the Xfinity section. So we got Sam Mayer 13 below ahead of us. SVG is 10 below. Then Allgaier 7 below. And then Allmendinger is obviously 7 above. So you've got probably the 5 best road course people all going to the Roval, needing points and needing wins. It's going to be a show. And we'll get into the new Roval stuff later on in this show. But, yeah, Talladega was just a big miss. When we got, I wanted to talk to you about this because I was on the bottom in stage 1, and I was going to do that normal thing where I was like, you know what? I'm not really able to suck up the people that well. I'm not able to break the bubble, so I'm just going to hang on the bottom here and just move forward methodically. But then I ended up 4th on the bottom, and I don't mind being 3rd because that basically guarantees you stage points, being 3rd on top or the bottom, in my opinion. Just often, like, that's how I view it at Daytona Talladega. If I'm in the top 3 of the 2 rows, then I've got a chance at stage points, and I'm in a pretty good spot. Then we got to 4th on the bottom, and I was like, I don't like this. And then I tried to make moves, and every lane I picked died. I went to the top, it died. I went to the middle, it died. Then we're losing laps, and I'm at the top, and I'm like, okay, handling's really becoming a big thing. Everyone's super loose. It was super hot. Yeah, it was super hot. Cars were getting sideways all over the place. The rubber is laying down a ton. And I'm like, all right, this is the time to move through the middle. People are having to lift. I'm going to force the issue here, go through the middle. And as I'm thinking that, the 16 gets super loose, which checks up the top lane, and this car in front of me, and I don't know who it was, it's a 92, just loses it. Like, basically runs in the back of someone and loses it. And I have nowhere to go, so sort of get into him with the front, and it caved in the nose. And that started our race of slowness.
Super Speedway racing is so funny in a sense that the thing that makes Super Speedway racing great is when you just cut the horsepower back and the cars can run wide open.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what creates the pack racing. But yet the thing that makes Super Speedway racing greater is when the cars get slick again and you have to lift.
Yep.
Like it's a weird thing. You know what I mean? Like it's there's a weird balance there, and I mean, in my opinion, as a driver and as a fan, because shoot, this goes all the way down to like watching the Firecracker 400 and on iRacing and in real life. Like, there's no better race than a race at Daytona where they draft and draft and draft, but yet on a long run they have to lift, they can pass, they can, maybe they're in a single file line and they have to pull out and jump ahead. Like that's That's actually what makes it fun, I think, when it gets to that sweet spot.
No, you're right. And that's when I saw everyone getting sideways, I was like, we were pretty loose as well. Like, I had some big wiggles in 3 and 4 when I was on the bottom, but I was like, all right, that happens. Like, just keep it together. But when they saw everyone get super loose, and this was like 5 laps before the end of the stage, I want to say, I was like, oh, this is a chance to now really make some headway, because now I can drive, balance, take some risk, but get a reward on the other side of taking the risk, maybe going through the middle, that sort of thing. But then right as I realized that, they wrecked, and then we got our nose punched in. So then it was a battle back. We got all the way back to the car was pretty quick again. Not pretty quick, but decent in the draft. And then there was a ginormous wreck on the front stretch into 1. I went super low, and I'm like, I got this thing. I'm good. I'm so low, I'm about to hit the grass. But I'm like, I don't want to go too far in the grass. And as I'm down there, I'm like, all right, we're pretty good. And I look to the corner of my eye, and I see this yellow thing coming down the track. And I'm like, well, I've missed him. Boom. Slammed. Spun around so hard, my head hit the left side headrest, like in a way I felt like, whoa, what was that? Get spun around. Thankfully, don't hit the wall a ton, so we can keep going. But it ripped our rear bumper off. We got that reattached, and AJ and I pushed AJ all the way back to the top 10. We finished 12th in the last restart. So
nice.
One of those days. Yep. Not great for our big machine racing team, and not great for our playoff hopes. We really needed stage points and have a showing like we had Daytona in the summer. We just we didn't pull it off. So you'll have that.
We got some interesting reviews this week.
Well, we got no new written ones on Apple. Come on, people. What are you doing? What are you doing? But on Spotify, we got one. Before we get to the next stuff, I hope this makes the show, from Trevor Phipps, because
Check.
ever since I start... Yeah.
Got that
because
one.
Got him. Because ever since I've started listening, I've become more and more of a fan of both of you. Wish I would have found this show, not podcast, quicker. Thank you. Hope to see you both in race cars after the season more. Good luck, Parker, on the rest of your year. Go get them. Thanks, Trevor. Appreciate it. Now,
Thanks,
Landon,
Trevor.
Yeah, and on YouTube, though, we actually blew up on YouTube this week for all our clips. Everything's doing great. If you're not subscribing on YouTube, go subscribe. Go check us out. You get to watch this. I'm not in the North Carolina closet this week. I'm actually outside of it, which is nice. Landon's, as always, in Iowa. But on YouTube, Landon, I'm wondering, because from so many of the comments, did you get your check from NASCAR this week?
I've been accused of being a NASCAR operative.
You're a plant. You're an industry plant.
BGR33 said, never would have thought Landon is a toe the party line company man. Wait, isn't don't those two statements kind of conflict with each other? Because towing the party line wouldn't that mean like I'm sort of
veering? I think that towing the party line is like a political term of you're just following the talking points.
I love this one. Somebody created a new account just to say that, because it's at
just
1987-467-39 whatever. Landon sounding like a France family member.
Ooh. How's your jet?
That would be awesome, actually. And then Dylan Brown said, wow, you're trying to discredit their arguments. Their meaning probably the teams, I'm guessing. I don't know. I only see the comments here. I don't know what clip this is from.
That's from the main episode last week.
Just from the episode. Okay.
Yeah. It got worse when we clipped the discussion about the lawsuit of 2311 FRM versus NASCAR.
There were a couple of comments that were a little bit more aggressive, Landon, but I figured...
Really?
Yeah. But it's okay. I mean, this gives the general gist.
Here's the thing. I didn't get a check this week. I haven't really never has it just said NASCAR on it.
I've gotten checks from NASCAR before.
Really? Just direct?
I've tested for them.
Oh, okay. I've never got
Garage
that.
56, baby.
Well, you are a company man.
I just exposed my conflicts of interest.
How dare you? I've got a NASCAR production, so I guess that counts. I'm making jokes. I don't think either of us is a NASCAR operative or industry plant.
Can we talk for just a second about... I know.
Yeah.
Well, we have more PR lap. Let's finish the PR lap here, and we can touch on this because I want to defend what I said last week, And I do
Yes,
want to
we'll give you
defend
that
my
chance.
nuance because I said on this show that until we hear back from NASCAR in like an official capacity, it's the public opinion is going to be strongly in favor for 2311 front row, the teams, because they're the only ones that made a statement, right? They're the only ones with a voice. And these lawyers, in my opinion, are I can't believe I'm tripping over the words that I'm about to say. The most articulate people on the planet. I couldn't even say that, right? Like, isn't that funny?
Well, no,
Lawyers
they know
are the
legal
most
speak.
articulate
They
people
know
on the
legal
planet.
speak. I'm not going to
Right.
give them articulation. They are great at speaking in gobbledygook.
You are not going to box in a lawyer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when a lawyer has, especially lawyers of this caliber, right? When they have the ability to write a letter, write a complaint with no real-time rebuttals, right? These letters have been carefully crafted over hours and hours and teams of people getting paid $1,000 an hour to write these letters, right? Mm-hmm. And they distribute it to the public. They file it in this complaint, in this court filing, and they're the only ones who have spoken, right? They have the public opinion at that point. And so it's, yes, I have, like, I share the opposite side, or what NASCAR, what I think, it is my opinion that I think, I don't know what truly comes out of this, because I'm not a lawyer, right? I don't know if, we
Can I
can't
stop you
fully
right there?
litigate this thing to say that 2311 is going to win this lawsuit.
Yep.
But that is kind of the biggest thing that I think I want to point out.
I like that. We will get into more of that here soon. You did start by saying you wanted to continue the PR lap, and then you wanted to right your wrongs. I think you said it best, though. Before we move on, I think you did make it very clear that until we'd seen the other side, that would be the public opinion situation. And I think for everyone to understand, we also, at that time, had only seen that one statement from FRM in 2311. So we'll see what we're going to find. We're going to dive deeper into that without being lawyers, as I mentioned, going forward. Let's just do one email that we got to our friends at themoneylap.com. Hey, fellas, love the show. Not a podcast. Love that. Great insight in A1 ad read transitions. Anyway, I just finished making a custom diecast of Parker's 2022 Mid-Ohio win and would love to get Parker to sign it this weekend at the Roval. I will be there. I think he goes on to say he would like me to do it on Sunday. I don't know if I'll be there on Sunday. I'm not doing NBC this weekend, but I will be there on Saturday, so come find me. I'll be there all day. Also, he says, I hope we can connect and I don't end up like Kyle Busch just waiting in the green room all day. That's from James. Thank you, James. I will find you.
Speaking of waiting, Parker.
Wait, what is it?
If you don't like waiting for your gosh darn it. If you don't like waiting for your diecast to come in, then look no further than SpoilerDiecast.com, one of the fastest growing companies in the industry. What sets Spoiler Diecast apart, Parker? Well, let me tell you. They have exceptional service and orders that ship either same or next day. That's the waiting part. Ensuring you get your hands on your favorite products in no time. The best part, they also have free shipping on orders over $20. You can enjoy a smooth and affordable shopping experience with SpoilerDiecast.com, getting your favorite NASCAR collectibles, but not just NASCAR. They've got a little bit of everything. Dirt sprint cars, IndyCar, F1, all the good stuff. They are passionate racing fans just like us. They have over 1,100 unique products currently in stock. SpoilerDiecast.com is one of the largest inventories in the industry, and they are growing. They've been a family friend of the pod for over a year now.
Yeah. Our longest running relationship. Speaking of which, I met the Spoiler Diecast crew at Talladega this weekend. Evan and the crew, Tyler was celebrating his bachelor party in the infield. They actually took home my rear bumper from my number 48 Spike Cooler Chevy as a souvenir. So maybe you'll see that on Spoiler Diecast. I don't know. Also, speaking of getting your diecast signed by me, if you buy my Spike Cooler Chevy diecast using code MONEYLAB at SpoilerDiecast.com, it comes signed. So you don't even have to find me. It's already done. Love you guys. SpoilerDiecast.com. Go check them out. Let's talk NASCAR and the Cup Series. You already started, Landon. by your statement of wanting to right the wrongs of the internet commenters.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you like to dive into our latest information that has been put out there via our friend Bob Pockris today, in that we can see the letters that 2311 and NASCAR exchanged?
Yeah, they're really good,
post
and
the
they're
charter offer. Yeah,
if you're a listener and you haven't seen this, I guess that where I would go is Twitter and go to Bob Pockris's, and that's where you'll find he's posted screenshots of the letters. It's basically a letter from 2311 to NASCAR, to Steve Phelps, around the time I think that NASCAR gave them their ultimatum. So this is 2311 notifying NASCAR that they weren't signing the charter agreement, and then NASCAR has a response, and then 2311 has another response to that. Very interesting, and they're very readable, right? So it's not like trying to read the complaint where it's a bunch of legal terms that you don't understand and hard to put into context. It's very plain English written letters, in my opinion. So they're interesting to me. I think that obviously the entire lawsuit itself doesn't hinge on what's the content of these letters, and there's a lot more that will be litigated. But I still stand on, first of all, the most interesting thing to me going on right now is this injunction, right? And what comes out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point, I've had this thought in the last couple of days that I think that NASCAR, through the last 7 years, I think that is it possible that they made a fatal mistake that opened themselves up to this? And that fatal mistake was the charters in the first place. Right? Like whether they have the, whether NASCAR is on the right side of this or not, or 20 can change my verbiage and say whether 2311 is on the right side of this or not. Had the charters never been created, right? Had NASCAR sort of put the stop to the charters back in 2015, in that whole discussion going into 2016, would 2311 even have the case that they think they have now? Now, I know back in 2015, 2016, antitrust lawsuits were being thrown around, but I wasn't, party to any real high level. It was more just, people talking, right? It was like, oh, I've heard that there's an antitrust lawyer looking at this or whatever. But the reason I bring this all up is because back in 2015, before the charter agreement, there was no obligation to go race, right? Nope. It was a completely open field.
Yep. And you were locked into the field if you were the top 36 in points.
Yeah, you were locked in based on points, right?
Yep.
But you also didn't have like some contractual obligation with NASCAR to field a car, and
it was race by race.
Like it was
you just showed up.
You show up and race, right? Did that, and maybe I might be glossing over some of the because the teams did have contracts with NASCAR back then, right? There's ownership agreements and obligations, so I don't want to gloss over the obligations that did exist, and maybe some of those in owners' opinions or an antitrust lawyer opinions, maybe those did violate some kind of antitrust laws or something. But did NASCAR sort of walk themselves into this issue, this mess, by reaching agreements with the teams for these charters? Like, did it? That's. You don't have to answer it. Neither of us are really capable of answering the question. But
I was going to say, I don't know. Once again, we're not lawyers, but
right,
that's
one of my thoughts. Yeah. It's just like, here I'm just reading through all these letters and reading through, and I'm going to sound like a NASCAR operative again. But I'm listening to Denny and and these team owners that are like, poor us, right? Like as if NASCAR has a gun to their head that they have to race, right? As if NASCAR is forcing them to do business with them, right? Which, you could maybe say, like, well, we have this charter agreement, so we have to field a car, and we have to field the car that they tell us to field, and we got to spend, they're requiring us to spend all this money, and it's a monopoly because they're stealing all the profits and making us spend all the money to race, right? Mm-hmm. And we have this contractual obligation to race, and if we don't race, we lose it all, right? And it's like with the charter agreements, I guess I could see that, what they're saying, right? But then without the charter agreements, I could also see this like, well, it's a free market. If you don't want to race, nobody's making you race. Right, but if you do want to race, here's the rules that you have to abide by.
Yep.
Right
for the injunction.
And so,
go ahead.
That's I don't know. That's just my random thought experiment for this.
For the injunction, if you remember last week, I did find back in the 1970s when the IndyCar versus kart teams were going USAC versus kart and IndyCar. This was in IndyCar. We're trying to stop the kart teams from racing the Indy 500. They were granted an injunction for all those teams to race in the Indy 500. Now, not knowing some of the particulars, that doesn't mean, one of the things I think that's interesting with that whole injunction is that, from NASCAR side, it'd be like, well, you can race as an open team. Basically, anyone can just show up with the right car, pay the entry fee, so on and so forth. But being able to race under the provision of what the charter gives you, as if they had signed it with a new charter agreement, that's the interesting part of that injunction. We'll see where that goes. They did ask for a expedited discovery, by the way, and they hope to have that before the end of the year.
The teams asked for an expedited discovery, or NASCAR?
The 2311 FRM for the injunction. And it will be ruled on by a federal judge in Charlotte, North Carolina, before the end of the year. So we'll see what happens there. Kessler also said, which is the attorney for 2311 FRM, estimated the case could take 1 to 2 years if it goes to a full jury trial. That's the actual full antitrust lawsuit. So we'll see. To your earlier point, I think that has been one of the tougher things for all motorsports. This isn't just a NASCAR thing. If you look at the history of F1, of IndyCar was just, we talked about 2 weeks ago how they just put in a charter system. All these motorsport series have gone through sort of growing pains of trying to apply some form of what stick and ball sports has had. And that means, stick and ball sports all follow a very similar franchise model, right? Of between the teams and the stadiums and how the actual league is run and so on and so forth, right? Whereas motorsports has always been different because it's a bit of a governing body or a sanctioning body and maybe a media rights holder, and then there's teams, and then there's drivers, and there's always been this openness to a lot of the motorsport series, and so they've all gone through this. If you look at the history of F1, they've had a very tumultuous time over the last 3 decades, getting to where they are now, where they, the latest ownership, Liberty Media, they got to where they're basically at 50% of the revenue of the sport, and it's a pretty symbiotic relationship because they also have a cost cap, right, which has helped as well in F1. But before that, if you look back just 12 years, 15 years ago, there were still talks at times, and there was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and in the early 2010s, the teams were threatening to start their own series at times because of trying to figure this sort of stuff out. So, with the whole charter thing, I think that when they did that, it was looked at as this in between the idea of stick and ball sports and what you could apply to motorsports without it being some sort of franchise, which is a tough thing to do when you don't have stadiums and all that stuff that the teams own. So I think it's probably the natural course of business that happened. To your, answering your question, I have no idea, but I think understanding the history of how this came about is important, and I think it's also important to understand this isn't siloed to NASCAR. This is more of a motorsports problem than it is just a NASCAR problem. Motorsports series in general have struggled to figure out how to compensate race teams commensurate to the income of the series versus what it costs to go racing. And that has just been a problem through and through, and it may forever be a problem. And I know F1 right now is in a great spot, but without the explosion post-Drive to Survive of their revenues, I don't know if you'd be hearing all the hunky-dory, cheery stuff you hear out of F1. And that's just a fact. So we'll see where this goes. But at the end of the day, a growing pie makes it really easy like F1. For NASCAR, it's been a pretty almost stagnant pie in a lot of ways, and now it's increased. We'll see how it gets split up and that sort of thing. But are we done legal talking?
Why?
What?
Like NASCAR, like motorsports is a competitive sport. The reason it's hard to control costs in a competitive sport is because you can't. There's never enough money, right? That's how competitive sports
It's a zero-sum game.
Right. That's how competitive businesses are. It's just there's never enough money, right? Nobody truly has a monopoly, right? Like you have to compete. No team, right? I'm talking about teams.
How dare you say that? You brought that word in, you NASCAR operative.
Well, what?
This guy.
Like, what is it about stick and ball sports that, or do they have the same? Do they ultimately do have the same problem as racing, where it's just like there's never enough money?
Problems. There's never enough money. I think they have the same problems. I think the only difference they have is that they don't have this technological piece that takes up 90% of the revenue. Well, no, they're not building parts and pieces in cars that are constantly becoming obsolete, right? The basis of motorsports.
Worse.
What, humans?
They're worse. They have humans that they have no asset value in. Right?
Well,
that is
and
true.
They also have arenas and towns that want to behold.
I'm not going to.
But that's one of the funny things
real
about
estate's real estate.
Yeah, stick and ball sports is interesting. Is like they literally can pack up their bag and move an entire team. We've seen it done overnight before with the Baltimore Colts and all of that. So it's just interesting how they can get subsidized basically through local places that want to support them and make them richer.
But all right, just to both of you, just hold up for 1 second. I was going somewhere with this. If you look at the design of a race team, right? Let's just think about a race team at the top level. Let's just say what percentage is engineering? 60%? 70%? So, on a 100-person race team, 70 of your people. So what is the roster of an NFL team? How many people are on the NFL roster, Josh? I can't remember. Is it 32?
What, for actual players?
Yeah.
53.
53. All right. So that's your big... So they would be your cars, right? So then you probably have people in the background, whatever, but are commiserate. So I'm saying is that technology for race teams is the big problem. For motorsports in general, it's always been the problem.
Well, but
you have to
stick and ball
build race
sports
cars.
Have spending caps on.
They also have spending
those
caps.
things.
Yes, they have spending caps on people. Yeah, and all that.
And
stuff.
maybe the way they like the auditing of those spending caps is simpler because it's just contracts with players.
Possibly.
I mean, can the team spend as much money as they want on technology? Like, I don't know. Like, can the Dallas Cowboys invest in some super crazy AI simulation football field that does nothing but run simulations of football games and playbooks? I mean, maybe they already have, right? Could they spend $30 million a year on? Could they? What's stopping them from that?
They can also one of the interesting things
just
is
laughing about it.
with the draft is those contracts for the draft are based on the selection. So if you're the first overall pick, you get the highest contract as a rookie.
Right.
And those are all predetermined. So
we're going all over the
I was going to say, hold on. Let's get back to shit we know because we don't know anything about any of this. My point, I got to just go one step back. To put it lightly, why motorsports series have struggled in the past is because it costs so much to compete, and it's an endless need of money. That's why it's difficult. And so, why F1 has worked is possibly because of the budget cap, but they also had a huge, massive increase in revenue via their explosion of popularity. Moving on. Let's talk about some racing. Over 3.1 million people watched Talladega this past Sunday, which is the highest rating since 2018, I believe, for Talladega. What did you have? I'm sorry.
Very smooth.
Hold on, people.
Very smooth transition, Parker.
Landon is hitting me up in chat. This is the worst. This is our worst show ever. I think this is going to
No, it's not. You can keep going. Let's just we'll go to the next.
We'll come back to it. So I was saying that a lot of people watched Talladega this past weekend. It was one of the more unique super speedway races we've ever seen in the next gen era. You had periods of time where they ran literally 4 wide, 5 or 6 rows deep through the field, and it looked tremendous. It absolutely looked insane that they were doing this lap after lap for large swaths of time. Now, there was a bit of the fuel-saving thing happening. That is for sure, and that was allowing a lot of it. But I did imagine at one point, I'm on the broadcast, I'm seeing a lot of this, and there was serious racing happening. People weren't just riding around. There was people trying to make moves and discussing when to go and not to go, how much fuel to save, how much not to save. That sort of thing was going on for sure. But I sat there and I was like, if you were in a bar and didn't have the sound on and had no idea what the actual context of why these cars are running 4 wide, that many rows deep, you'd be sitting there being like, this is the craziest thing I've ever watched. What the hell is going on here? They're going 200 miles an hour 4 wide for like 20 laps. This is insane. I think from that side, it looked tremendous. It did end in towards the end, there was a ginormous wreck. The largest wreck in Cup Series history. At 28 cars were involved, which then I got to interview all of them afterwards. We do need to give a shout-out, by the way. Before that, there was a wreck in Stage 2 between Alex Bowman and Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney got turned into Ross Chastain. It was a big wreck. Bowman basically just hit Ryan Blaney too hard coming out of the tri-oval. But Marty Snyder put on a TV masterclass at the Infield Care Center. He interviewed Ryan Blaney, then led to a report, which then led to a radio, got done with that, and interviewed Alex Bowman all in one swath, which I thought was pretty impressive. But
He's
nonetheless, yeah, he's the top. He's the top level TV guy. It's incredible. He was born for it. Let's talk about this. So it did end in a side-by-side finish after that wreck between Ricky Stenhouse and Brad Keselowski. Ricky Stenhouse was able to win it. But this wreck did bring out a lot of people discussing all sorts of things about how it was addressed. Would you like to talk to racing, or would you like to talk procedures and rules?
We can talk about procedures, but I don't really care to dwell on them. I want to talk about the racing.
Nor do I.
I want to talk about Kyle
Thank you.
Busch.
Cool. Let's do it.
And then I do want to talk about a little bit of just this whole big wreck and some super speedway stuff. So that can be with the racing. So start wherever you want to start. I'll jump in.
All right. So let's start with the racing. Looked tremendous. Yes, they're saving fuel, but I thought it was one of the best races in the next gen era for super speedways. Disagree or agree?
I don't disagree. I feel like if I'm going to pat myself on the back at all, I'm pretty sure I know I texted you earlier in the week and thought that the aero changes would add some stability to the cars and would promote more stable pack racing. And so I know they're fuel saving, so maybe they're not running full max effort for that whole race. And I also know we did have the largest wreck in Cup Series history. But to see so many highlights and so much conversation about just 4x4x4x4 racing, I was like, I wonder if those minor tweaks to the aero just stabilized the cars enough that allowed for this sort of pack gridlock.
Okay. I kind of see it.
Mm-hmm.
It could have had an effect. No one really knows because there's no real, the teams are not able to do wind tunnel testing. Yeah, they don't really they get a little aero data from NASCAR, which is
but they added
a lot
side
of them
skirt to the right rear,
unusable.
which is like, if you wanted to stabilize the cars, that would be the first place to do it.
That definitely could be about some of it. I did ask about handling because handling was such a topic on Saturday, as I mentioned earlier in the show, and a lot of crew chiefs were like, "Nope, we're not grip limited at all." So I was like, "Okay." So I don't know. I think some of it could be just obviously the drivers and teams figuring out this car as well, right? And understanding that you can make lanes happen and take advantage of when people are saving fuel to get track position and take a little more risk and then use fuel and then try to save when you get up front and that sort of thing. And so I think we saw a bit of that.
I like it.
Well, yeah, and I know there's
and
a lot of people
producing good winners.
100%. Well,
I think
there's all these people just being downers about it because they're like, if you know what's happening, it's not real racing. And I'm like, fuel has been a product. Like fuel racing has been a thing ever since they first raced cars. I was like, that is just the nature of racing. An internal combustion engine needs fuel.
Cars got to have gas in them to go. That's a fundamental.
No way. Never heard of it.
Yeah, I think strategy is a big part of racing. It's the arguments is just like, to what degree is strategy supposed to be part of racing, right? Okay,
yeah,
that's what they're arguing. Let's just not. They're taking one extreme. Let's not just take the other. But so I don't know. I love it. I personally love it. I think there's, for me, for my brain, for my race fan in me, there is plenty of room in my heart for strategy in motorsports. I have lots of room for that. So I love seeing it. I love hearing about that stuff. And at the end of the day, especially a super speedway race, it's not ending with a fuel mileage deal. Like it ends with an all out, everything they got to those, whether it's a final restart or the last 10 laps. Nobody's babying it to the line at a super speedway anyway. So I think it just makes the middle part of the race interesting. It creates storylines. Probably there's more storylines out there that can even be told in a 3-hour broadcast.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think I get a little bit of the frustration of this car is draggy, and therefore when they are going full out, it's basically 2x2, right? Which I think can be tweaked, and there's got to be a way to do it. But I think changing the there's a lot of people like, change the stages so they don't have to pit. And I'm like, well, I kind of like the pitting and the strategy part. If you're going to have stages, at least have some strategy in there. Doesn't need to be full out. Secondly, it definitely beats all of them on the wall like we do in Xfinity occasionally. Riding around
I don't know,
in the line.
though. I mean, I like when I said earlier, the one thing that makes super speedway racing better is when the cars have to handle and they slide and they go single file and then they break out. I mean, that's interesting to me too, right? That's strategic. It's a different type of strategy. So
doesn't pass the bar test.
Not for you?
No, because it doesn't pass the test. If you were in a bar watching that, you'd be like, what the hell?
Does it look interesting?
No, it doesn't look interesting. No. So,
yeah,
that's
interesting.
A fail.
Since we're still talking about racing,
yep.
What was Kyle Busch doing at the end?
At the end? So I was going to get to I wanted to move there. So let's talk about the end. You come down to, there's the ginormous wreck, the colossus of wrecks in the NASCAR Cup Series of all time. We'll maybe talk the other stuff in a little bit, but, they can get past this wreck. It's a green-white checker restart, and Brad Keselowski has Kyle Larson pushing him, and Ricky Stenhouse is on the top being pushed by, now I can't remember.
William Byron.
William Byron, right. And behind William Byron was Kyle Busch. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking, all right, if something happens here, Kyle's in a pretty good spot. We wanted him to win. We talked about it last week, just how gutted everyone was for him not to spin out at Kansas and not get the win there. So he pulls out in 1 and 2, and I was like, from third in the lane, I was like, what is he doing? That's not going to work. No one went with him. He drops all the way to the back because it was very obvious that you couldn't get a third. When they're going, this is the argument against what we saw with this next-gen car. When they are going full chat, full out, it is a 2x2 affair a bit because there's so much drag, you have to be following the cars in front of you. So you need a lot of help to make any sort of lane work. It's more than they've ever been. You need 3 or 4, and even then, that top lane will just die because it's just going too far of a distance. You can't make up the speed. But he pulled out in a way that almost looked like he had a problem. So I talked to the team today at RCR, and I was like, what was he doing? And they're like, well, were you going to ride around and finish 6th? We want to win. And I was like, well, where was it going to happen? So, I don't know. What do you think he was doing?
I don't know, because it almost, gosh, this is I can just get crucified for this, and he'll probably leave the green room for me saying this, because obviously he's waiting to come on later.
Yeah, he's coming on.
So we can also ask him this later, but it almost looked like a rookie move. You know what I mean? It looked like you got the tiniest run. He had a little bit of a run, whatever. I don't want to say tiniest run, but he got a run, or he had going into turn 1 on the last lap, and then just kind of went the long way around. You know what I mean? With no real
ARCA?
help.
An ARCA where they pull out? by themselves, and you're just like,
Yeah,
what
and it was just
that?
like he pulled out by himself, and there was nobody really committed, and it was just like it was a hope and a prayer that like 4 people behind him magically were just as motivated to help get him a win as he is.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
you know what I
that.
mean? Like, it just is,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. And as long as he's been racing and as good as he is at that stuff, like his brother, Kurt, is a master at just jamming the middle at a super speedway. Like, that is one of the, my opinion about how to advance, right, at a super speedway is like one of the best ways to do it is to just jam the middle.
I tried in my race. I wanted to.
When you're on a like stacked up 2x2x2 type deal, it is really, really hard to get the top going. Like, it takes laps, it takes commitment, it takes you get shuffled up, and then you surge back and forward, and then finally you get some kind of like break in the middle happens, and then your lane shifts and you can clear the middle, then you can move back down, right? That does not happen over the course of 3/4 of a lap after the white flag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No. Yep.
And so I don't know if he wasn't willing to, like, I don't know. Now I want to replay it, so I'm not just making it up in my mind of what I think I remember seeing on Sunday. But, like, I don't know if he just wasn't willing to get on someone's left rear in the middle 1 and 2, or didn't think that he could generate the run that he needed down the backstretch to jam middle or whatever. But I thought for sure that slamming the brake and backing into the car behind him to create a gap in front and then get a push, and then maybe you go top 3 down the backstretch because at least it's straight and you're not taking the long way around, and you can hope for a gap or hope to clear yourself or whatever. But just kind of the time and place that he did it, I want to rewatch it now. The time and place that he did it,
Take a look.
didn't see.
Yeah, take a look. We'll make this work. Because I know what you're saying. And I said, that's the reason I asked them. Oh, here, Josh has pulled it up for you. I asked them this because I was like, what was he doing? So who does he have behind him? He has who is that? 43, Eric Jones.
Yeah,
He's Eric Jones behind him.
So we're coming
So
to
he's-
the white. It's for those that are
Yeah.
watching, that are listening to this, and we're trying to kind of stay on task here, and we can't really show the video, obviously. So like, we're coming to the white here, right, Josh? Is that where you have this?
Yeah.
We're coming into the tri-oval.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
coming into the tri-oval here. This is the
All right,
tri-oval.
let it
Busch
play.
is in the 3rd row on the outside.
And
Now he
he's
does have a
dropped back
gap.
off- Yeah.
He's a car
He's
length
dropped
gap
back off
in
the
front of
24.
him.
So, and he's got
He's a
the
car length
43
gap in front
connected
of
to
him.
him.
Okay, so he
Oh,
gets
the
a push from the 20. Wow.
He had a big push from the 43, and I guess he thought he was going to come with him. Unless the
Go
43's
back
push
again.
moved
Go back
him.
to that same move.
Well, unless the 43's push moves him, and it wasn't really on purpose as much as he just got shoved out there. Oh, no, he moves. Yeah, he's got a
moved.
big
He thought-
push from the 43. He thought he was coming with him.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
he set that push up too early, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So
he
he
needed that
he did
push
it
down the
perfectly.
backstretch, not into turn 1.
Exactly. He needed to then when people would have taken the risk, Eric said, yep, see you later. I'll take a top 5. And
Yeah, that's
Like, 'cause-
literally what happened.
literally, he's like, all right, dude.
And, I guess fair enough. I did see a lot of tweets from fans that were absolutely right, that it was like, okay, apparently Kyle Busch is the only one that wanted to win this race.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
on one hand, it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, Eric could have YOLO'd with him into turn 1 on the outside on the last lap. But then I think both of them would have gotten shuffled
the
back.
back. Oh, yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because what the risk that Eric runs in that position is that Eric goes with the 8, right? The 8 go all the way back to where I can visualize this, to the point that he made the move. Eric goes with the 8. Keep going ahead.
They have a huge gap to the 7 behind them, by the way. They have
Okay,
a 3
pause
or
it right
4
there.
car
Pause
length
it right
gap
there.
to the 7
Go back
behind
2
them, by the
seconds.
way.
2
So-
seconds.
So
Sorry to get that.
Let's
Just so
just
you know,
say
entering
it-
turn 1, they push. They have a
Pause
huge
it
gap
right
to
there.
the 7, so there's not even a third car that could connect with them, by the way, on this. So it's
Right,
just going to be two people, 2 drivers.
right,
versus the
and
field.
that's a product of Kyle backing up in the tri-oval, right? He gets this huge run. They're going into turn 1. Now they've gapped the 7 on the outside lane behind them. He's got this big run. He commits to the outside, long way around. If the 43 goes with him, I don't want to say best case scenario, but in my opinion, best case scenario, the 8 doesn't clear for the lead. The 8 gets nose to nose with the front row, okay? Mm-hmm. Which would put the 43 nose to nose with the second row. And they're committed at that point, okay? Now just stay with me here. I'm trying to help visualize this. Now we're coming off a turn 2, 3x3x3 down the backstretch. Now, it's my professional opinion that they would stall out down the backstretch for the entire length of the backstretch in that position, and then the 7 would close the gap to where the 43 used to be, and then the 8 and the 43, when they lose their momentum, would just end up sliding back, and they would end up
3 and 4. They would have fallen way back.
In 3 and 4, they would have fallen back, right?
Yep.
Do you think
he needed
the best
that push.
chance that they could have made is if they would have had that gap at the end of the tri-oval, built their momentum through 1 and 2, and made the move down the backstretch.
Do you think...
Or wait, Josh, hold on. Or waiting to... You would really want that run with this next-gen car, from what I understand, from what I gathered from what people said about how it races and the moves you can make. You would really want to have achieved what he did off of 4 through the tri-oval. Because you would have popped on the 24 and the 47. Potentially, they're not able to stay connected. You can break them apart, and you win it at the line. You don't win it. I think down the backstretch, you still have a huge problem, which is that you have to have a huge head of steam to get by the bottom 2 rows. Well, and probably what happens is you stall out the middle row, which is the 47 to 24, and the 6 and the 5 just drive away and then control to the finish.
So chances are, if they do what I have been saying they should have done, which is, save the run for the backstretch, then they pop outside the 24, they have momentum, and the 17 throws a block to the very top, right? And then the best case scenario is it. What's that?
Yeah, who the hell is the 17?
You mean 47?
I'm sorry, 47.
Yeah.
We've got people real confused.
I know. I should have said Stenhouse. So Stenhouse is leading the outside lane, right? The second lane. And so if Kyle Busch takes top of 3 down the backstretch with a big run, Stenhouse is going to throw a block to that very top. And then the best case scenario for Kyle, and for Ricky for that matter, would be that the 8 and the 47 connect, right? And then they connect, and Kyle can clear the field from there. But chances are they probably don't connect, because the 47, by throwing a block like that, is going to throw a boat anchor and take a huge, bump draft from the 8. I don't know. It's just.
Can we?
I guess
can we also say, you're talking now too many theoreticals, so I think we should move on. But the one thing I will add is that there is no worse feeling in the world in super speedway racing than when you get to the point where the 8 was when he popped, and suddenly he realizes there's no one with him, and you go, boo. It feels like you suddenly have literally blown an engine, because they are going to blow by you so quickly, and you have no speed and no power. So it's the worst feeling. I want to move to the end of the lap, by the way.
I think that we're all Kyle Busch fans right now.
We all are. Dude, he got cheers at Bristol. Cheers.
I know. I think we're all Kyle Busch fans right now. I wanted to see him win this. I want to see
he's going to win Homestead.
As a fan, I was sitting there and I was auditing who I wanted to see from the top 6 win the most, and I literally could not care less about the other 5. I was like, I wanted to see Kyle Busch win it, and I think that's partially why I was sad on the finish. But yeah, the only thing I wanted to ask was, if 43 goes up, does 23 and 54 behind him go up too? Because Toyota.
I don't know about that, because he's not in a winning position. And I know there's the whole OEM stuff, which we can get into a little bit towards the finish. Can't say for that, because they're actually, I don't think they would, because the 7's between them, and they never really had a run. That would be a tough putt. But the interesting thing that did occur, to your point about 47 throwing this theoretical block, if the 8 did materialize a run on the top, Landon, was if you go to the end off of 4, Keselowski clears the 47, clears him, and I asked him after the race in my interview with him, I said, did you think about popping there. Like, you didn't make the move. And he said, if I moved up, they were either going to, slam draft me or split me.
Yeah, are you talking about in the middle of 3 and 4?
So, no, go to the end of 4 here. He's leading, and he could pop up at any time here. Keep going, Josh. So
yeah, I agree with that. Off of 4, and that's a bad spot.
Yeah.
You cannot add more lateral load to your tires at that point, right? Like, that's what he would have to be doing. He's coming off the corner. If he moves up the racetrack and then has to change his lane and then sort of pull the car back left to straighten out at the same time that he's getting hit, he would have gotten wrecked or split, like you said.
I didn't disagree with them once I watched it back. They did have too much ahead of steam, but I thought it was a pretty cerebral thing because it's a definite thought. When you get clear of both rows on the last lap, you think cover top, cover bottom, cover top, cover bottom. He didn't move. He did, and
right. Brad's as good
lost
as they get
inches
on that stuff.
He's great. Also, he did technically have the contact that spun the 2 car that created the largest wreck in history, but I was having a bit of a chuckle because if you watch a lot of the wrecks this weekend, who's the car in each of those wrecks that didn't get involved in the wreck?
The guy that caused it.
The guy that caused it.
The theory stands.
Every single time in trucks, in Xfinity, and in Cup. If you watch
For all
those
of
wrecks,
you young drivers out there trying to make it in NASCAR, my one word of advice for you at super speedways is to cause the wreck.
Cause it.
If you can cause the wreck, you can get through it.
You can get through it, and let me tell you, it thins the field in your favor. So
that is a damn truth, and I've been saying it for years.
It is so true. I don't care too much to talk about rules and such now that we've broken down this race.
I don't either. I hate the damage vehicle policy.
It's just, it all sucks. This whole thing sucks. At the end of the day, I mean, I literally, my eyes glaze over because I just don't care. I mean, it does seem crazy that cars are being towed and not towed, and some have flat tires and some don't, and they're just who's deciding who has damage and what. Here's a pretty simple fix. Find a way that the damn cars don't blow tires or put interliners or change the wheels and tires, and let's all move on with our lives because this is just ridiculous. That's my statement.
Amen.
We don't have the problem in Xfinity. Moving on. Fix it. Find a way. Change the cars. I don't care what it costs. And make it better because this is it just looks stupid. So, moving on. Chicago. There was a bunch of numbers that came out from there, from this past 2 events, and it had attendance that exceeded the capacity of Chicagoland Speedway. So, big win for NASCAR in that market. Let's talk the Xfinity Series real quickly. The CW had 917,000 viewers for the Talladega race, which follows their over 900,000 for Bristol, their first race, and 700 some odd thousand for Kansas, which is actually massive. So the CW, it's working. That's a little bit below what it would have been on NBC or USA, which was roughly around 1 million to a little bit above 1 million usually for the Xfinity Series, but not a huge drop on an entirely new network as they go to being all 33 races next year. Pretty great for them. Also, JRM, Junior Motorsports, appealed the disqualification of Sam Mayer, and they failed as of today. Dale Jr. did tweet that the clip was bent on the one car. But I'll tell you what, this is just anecdotal evidence. I'm on pit road after the race. I'm walking with my car, which looks like it's been through a meat grinder, and I'm walking beside the one team, and I'm speaking to their crew guys because I said, damn, that's a clean car. I was like, I'm looking at every car in the field looks wrecked, and here's this basically new car. And I said to one of the team guys, I said, where'd you finish? And he said, 16th. And I said, guess sometimes you finish 16th with a clean car. He said, yeah. I was like, wow, that's a nice thing to know about Talladega. And I mean, I looked at this thing. It never even looked like it had a bump draft. So,
interesting.
NASCAR
Didn't
probably
RCR get a huge penalty back in New Hampshire with the COT because they had designed the clips to get bent or something?
Well, that was my next thought. You never know. I don't remember that, but you never know. We did talk about the point standings for Xfinity heading into the Roval. There is a new track, which I mentioned at the top of the show. Well, not new track. The track has been changed. So turn what used to be 6, 7, 8 is now turns 6 to 7, which means we basically go from where you used to take a right in 6, you now go straight over a blind crest into a long right-hander that leads into a left-hand hairpin that is now going to be NASCAR's version of the casino hairpin, because in the sim it's about 30 miles an hour or less. And it's so tight, so slow. It does not feel like you're moving. You do not have enough wheel in the car to do it. And it's a really interesting time. It's going to be we were doing things in the sim. I did 102 laps in the sim today. And basically, there's multiple ways to tackle turns 6 to 7 in terms of how you do that. But the big thing that's going to be the talking point is that you can basically turn left early and just rocket yourself to the apex to gain position on anyone doing the actual fastest line. So you read into that how you want, but this is going to be interesting. They also changed the final chicane and made it slower, but really it depends how much you can hop the curb, because it's not that much slower if you can hop the curb a ton. It wasn't a big change, at least in the sim, so we'll see how that lines up. But turn 7, Calamity Corner. Get your tickets for down in the turn 1 area of the Oval Grandstand, because it'll be a show.
What two questions. First, what is turn 8 to turn 7 transition like? Because that seems really interesting. Like, it's fast, but then you're going into this like heavy braking zone, but then even the straightaway into the heavy braking zone isn't straight. So what is that?
You're
like?
talking about 6 to 7.
Or 6 to 7. I'm sorry, 8 to 7.
So it's actually blind. It's actually no. It's a lot slower. So on the map it looks different. So in reality, it's actually a blind crest from 5 to 6. So you hop a crest and you start braking right at the crest. Then it becomes visible what you're going into, and it almost like feels like the road sort of falls away from you. And then from there, it's not straight at all. So it's like a squirt of the throttle, or like you tip into the throttle a little bit, drive it around the right-hander there towards 7, and then brake hard down to first gear for 7. It is, just a little dab of the throttle. Landon was sending things in our chat. I'm going to blow up your spot on that, because you distracted me once again. I don't have the brain capacity today to do both reading and talking. So then you go into the left-hander, which is super slow. So
this hairpin, what is it like getting off of the hairpin? Because we're talking about going on to the NASCAR turn 1, right?
Yeah.
And is the racing line off the hairpin? You're going uphill into the banking?
Yes, you do. But you can't.
That
is so weird. You can't even get the power down. Like it's
right.
It's
because it's uphill. It's
a little bit.
Really good. I'm gonna make a prediction. First of all, just on paper, this is clearly a SMI like shenanigans that they are known for, because they are the entertainers of this business, right?
Yep.
They are the last true promoters. No offense to NASCAR and ISC and what they do. But like SMI are the ones that are willing to try shit.
Yeah.
And
hell, they'd have us going through school buses and figure eights if they could.
Right.
So
that's like in their blood and in their nature.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do well with it, sometimes they don't. And so this is clearly intentionally designed for absolute chaos. But I'm looking at this thinking, I think this is a damn good racing corner. Like an off camber, not weird braking zone.
We'll see.
I don't like the manufactured Apex deal. I think that's a little corny. But this like weird braking zone, and then to a corner exit where there's banking transitions and it's up a hill on corner exit, that's going to make power down really weird. This would be a good racing corner.
It will definitely cause passing. There's no doubt. There will be a ton more passing than we've seen in the Roval prior. And I think even for the Cup car, because even for them, 6 is probably a little bit less of an awkward corner for them. But it's still just the opportunity, kind of like turn 11 at Coda, in terms of how you could just, like, if you want, turn early into the hairpin to get position on people. Now you have to pay for that on the exit. It's the same thing here, but really this is so tight, though. When someone does that, you can't even have a remote chance of beating them to the exit.
The way it's shaped, though, the way this corner is shaped looks to me like it will be inviting for crossover, right? So if you do send this haymaker on the inside, you're pointed the wrong way. Like, you have to change direction. It is a 180.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Serious 180.
It is a serious 180 to get pointed the other direction to go on the longest straightaway on the track, right? So
Correct.
if someone is going to throw a haymaker under you, I feel like you may not. It'll be interesting to see if you have to protect it and just take your beating into the corner, or if someone's going to throw a haymaker and they're, to your left and pointed the wrong way, if you can just keep your wide entry and make it just a smooth crossover.
Turn underneath them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a good point. I will say that it is so tight, though, from the sim, it's tough even from the outside to get it pointed earlier like that. But it is a good point. You probably would gain position on them. So, yeah, maybe we'll see some of that. Hey, why'd you tell everyone? I hope no other drivers are listening to us. That's my secret. I needed that. So, we'll see. This is interesting. Yeah, the last chicane, though, has been reprofiled as well. The restarts will be very difficult because it's in that chicane once again. So, the restarts, like if you're starting rows on back, you're going to be so separated from the field because of how tight the chicane is. So, I don't know what's going to happen there. That's going to be very interesting. Remember, they changed it that we restarted last year in the actual chicane as opposed to that cut through they used to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see, but I think you could seriously separate the field because of how tight the chicane is now. Any more questions?
I'm good.
All right. Let's move to open wheel.
You just got me excited for this race this weekend.
Oh, trust me, it's going to be worth watching. Like, compared to what you've seen at the Roval, I really, truly believe this is going to be very interesting. Compared to what has happened in the past, where it's tough to pass. I do think it's added a passing zone. So, speaking of which, let's jump into open wheel and F1 for a second. There was a report out there from autosport.com that, and this has been a bit of a discussion as of late, as in F1, that there's been a lack of safety cars. What do you say? Live long enough to see yourself race as an American.
That's right. Either die a hero, or live long enough to desire for American-style motorsports.
Yeah, and you want safety cars. So there's been a huge discussion, and he has a theory that it's because the current generation of F1 cars perform quickest when driven to 90%, not 100%.
That is a hell of a theory. And I don't know if I could wrap my head around it.
Money Lab, your destination for the most intelligent understanding of motorsports. So intelligent, we can't wrap our heads around it.
He says these cars are not easy to drive, but I think the problem of these cars as well is to extract the 100%. So if you drive at 90%, sometimes you're faster because you don't put the platform in an inconvenient angle or ride heights. You are not pushing the limits, and that's where everything falls apart. So sometimes driving at 90% is fast. That makes sense. So
sounds like stock cars.
Yeah, actually, well, no, it sounds like the next gen, right? So we had this with the previous gen cars, and you have it with the Xfinity car. This is something that I just made a living off of for years, was just finding the right feel and balance for not just the tire on the track, but like what position are you putting the car in arrow-wise on the track, right? Is your splitter down? You can control a lot more of that than you think from in the seat. Well, that only got amplified in the next gen car because the next gen brought underbody aerodynamics to NASCAR in a way that NASCAR had previously never even seen, right? We had been dealing with underbody aerodynamics, but not with a pan and a diffuser, right?
Yeah.
Well, that first year with the Gen 7, we had realized that your braking and the way that those like abrupt moves at some of these intermediate tracks where there's a lot of aero sensitivity could change, too much spike of the brake pedal at any track, really, for that matter, would change the aero platform and change the aero balance, right? You can make the car really loose on entry at an intermediate track by using too much brake or lifting out of the throttle too aggressively, and it would, just change the balance of the car. And make the car loose. So the drivers really had to get a lot smoother than what we had been doing with the previous generation Cup car, and smoother off the gas, smoother with the brakes, smoother with your hands. We found that the car liked to be, handled that way to be able to maintain that platform that the engineers essentially create, right, through the setup and the optimal aero setup. So I kind of understand what he's saying. It's interesting to me that his interpretation of that is that he has to race at 90%, right? Which to me, that's like, maybe that's telling him that he can't just blast the car into every corner. He's having to really be mindful of the platform of the car in every move that he makes, which is what he's saying. So, again, his interpretation of that to me is that he thinks he's driving at 90%. He's driving a lot closer to 100% than what he's saying, I think, in the article. But it's just funny to me that he interprets it that way.
And it's a little bit of like this, there's the old tropes in motorsports and driving, like, drive it in harder and outbrake the late breakers and that sort of stuff, right? And there is truth sometimes to some of that, but there is a lot more technique to all of this. And sometimes from inside the car, technique can feel like not trying as hard, right? It can feel like, well, I need to be doing more. I need to be hitting the brake harder. I need to be, trying to accelerate harder, wherever it is. And you interpret that as like, well, when I've been super fast at times, I'm giving it a brake, everything I've got, 1,200 pounds of pressure selling at a perfect rate and that sort of stuff. But sometimes it means 1,000 pounds of pressure feels like 90%. But that's what the car needs for that particular time and corner or whatever, downforce level, whatever it is. And therefore your interpretation is like, well, I'm just not pushing as hard. But it's like, nope, that's what the car needs. So that is fascinating for him to say that. Does it mean that there's less safety cars because of this? I don't know. That's a bit of a stretch. I think that's, a testament to reliability of the cars in this age. And you probably could do some more math and digging to find if maybe they're not racing as closely this year for every reason, through teams getting more spread out or whatever it is. I don't know, but I don't know if it's the 90%. So a little bit of a rumor in the F1 world, just as a heads up, that says multiple sources inside F1 have said that they're going to have one big car launch event in February 2025 to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Formula One. The event will take place in the O2 Arena in London, and F1 is targeting an audience of 18,000 tickets available to the public. Normally teams do their car launches separately. It sounds like they might want to do a big car launch event together. Car launch is really fun because it's like, hey, here's the car with this new livery, and we also haven't done any. We're not showing you any of the actual aero that's on these. So take this all with a grain of salt. Josh says his one takeaway from that is that NASCAR is apparently older than F1 because their 75th anniversary was. I almost said R, by the way. We're not working for NASCAR. We swear. We swear we're not working for NASCAR.
Oh, good one.
It was last year, or 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago or last year? The 75th anniversary.
Last year.
It was last year. That's right. Last bit of stuff here from the racing world. We'd mentioned at the top, IndyCar has a new flashy track, an event that they unveiled in Arlington, Texas, around the Cowboys Stadium in conjunction with Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, where they're going to be doing this big Arlington Grand Prix street race. Track looks cool, for sure, from the layout I'm looking at.
It's a complex track for a street course.
Well, but crucially, potentially a very, very, very long straightaway, which I always like on a street course.
Mm-hmm. A fast one, too.
I think, yeah, well, because I think F1 has really found that when you do these big, long straightaways on these street courses, and then you throw in some technical bits, but if you make it more valuable to be trimmed out, you get the kind of best racing from them. You know what I mean? Because they got to be trimmed out downforce-wise to get around these huge straightaways, which you spend so much time on, and therefore then when you make them go through the technical bits, the cars don't drive great, You get passing, you get sliding around. There's not a lot of grip because it's a street course. You see that at Jeddah. You see that at what's the other one that's like that? Oh, Azerbaijan. Like those really. Oh, and Las Vegas was that way. Las Vegas street course. You know, they all sort of force the teams in these low downforce setups that then make the cars incredibly hard to drive in the slow speed stuff. I like it.
So that's what NASCAR needs to design. A 2-mile oval, paperclip.
Oh, baby.
Long straightaways. long straightaways. Tight, like, think like Bristol tight corners, but a mile and a half track.
Oh, my gosh.
You just described the Daytona Beach course.
Yes.
Yeah, well, actually, do you know if you want to go down that path, I've always said like that sort of thing, or like one side is Bristol banked corner, one side is like Martinsville. Maybe do a right-hander. You know, back when we were doing all the skew stuff and it was getting way out of control, I was like, well, just build it like Trenton where there's a big right-hander and see who
make it go the other way once.
Go,
keep everybody honest.
Yes, I was like, see who wants to make their car only turn left. You have to go right one time. Good luck. There was a track like that called Trenton in New Jersey, and I always imagined with like how bad, you know, if you want to have the best oval race ever, throw a right-hander that's significant enough that they can't make them go left on them. Bam. Best race you've ever seen. Solved. NASCAR, we figured it out. We don't work for you, but we're here.
So
giving free advice.
Pocono is big enough. We could just do Pocono where you go down the front stretch and then you have to turn around at the end of the front stretch. And then you go back down pit road.
Poor Penske. We just gave them this great shout out. We somehow brought it right back to NASCAR and what NASCAR could be doing with the track. They have this great new event.
Anyways, that's congrats to Penske and Jerry Jones. That looks interesting.
No, it does. It does look cool. Like to see it.
Hey, you know what else is
IndyCar.
actually? Let me make a thoughtful point
What's
here
that?
that is interesting. Is this the first motorsports event in a long time that is like directly trying to penetrate the Dallas market? Because NASCAR and IndyCar always being in Dallas Fort Worth, it is seemed to me as someone in the industry that's been going to that track for decades that like once NASCAR was fleeting in popularity just a little bit, the Dallas Fort Worth market is so big that people in Dallas could go the whole weekend and not even know there's a NASCAR race, right? Because Fort Worth is the track is out of town. It's not in Dallas, and it's not really in Fort Worth either, but it has a Fort Worth address. And like, I just feel like through the worst of times for NASCAR, believe it or not, that race track and that race venue is a horrible location, right? Because it was not in your face, not for Fort Worth people, not for Dallas people. It's out on its own, and I think that played some of a role of why that track had poor attendance, right? And now you have this new race that is a little bit more in your face. I mean, Dallas is still a huge market, right? And even Arlington is like pointed out on a map. Parker, I bet you couldn't. Right?
I couldn't. No, I had no idea where.
And neither could I.
I had no idea that was even where the Cowboys were. I'll be honest.
But I don't know. I just wonder if this is what the response from this is. I'm sure it'll be good.
So why are they called the Dallas Cowboys if they're west? Arlington is a city in Texas west of Dallas.
You'd be shocked the amount of teams that are named after a city that they don't actually play in.
No, the New York Giants may play in New Jersey, but they're... I was just thinking in my head, I'm like, well, the New York Giants play in New Jersey, so that makes that make no sense why I'm asked that. And to your point, it's nowhere near Dallas. So, you know what? Nothing's in Dallas. Not even Dallas is in Dallas. That's what we've learned here today on this show, is that we're not lawyers and nothing is actually in Dallas. Is there even a Dallas? Has anyone been there? Landon,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Never mind. Oh, no. Speaking of Dallas, He's not there. He's been here in the green room the entire time. He pulled out of the draft. My God, Kyle, I'm so sorry. We had you coming on, but we just got totally lost talking about Dallas and whatever else we got into when you did your thing against all the commenters, and we've just run out of time. So it's going to have to be next week, bud. And you know what? Maybe it's with a trophy. I don't know, but we can't. It's not going to happen today. We're sorry. Peace. Thanks for listening or watching. If you want to be heard on this show, go to moneylap.com to leave us a voicemail. Be funny, be irreverent, or be insightful, but don't be dumb. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us grow. And if you're listening, please leave us a 5-star review to be featured on this show. Follow us on X, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We'll see you there.